We're going to read the scripture for today, and we're going through the book of Luke, the gospel according to Luke. And so what we believe is that every single part of Luke is about Jesus, and so every single part of Luke tells us something about Jesus. And so as you listen today, I want to encourage you. There's the programs on there. You can follow along with there if you want to. What does this that we are listening to, what does this tell us about Jesus? And as you're listening, you might want to kind of even underline or circle a couple things, and there's going to be a test in a few minutes. So listen to this text, the story about Jesus, and what is it that as Luke was looking at all the different stories he could tell, he wanted to record this story because there's some things that he wanted us to know about Jesus. So let's listen to this together.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to start reading Luke 4:31 to 44. Okay. And he came to Capernaum, a city of Galilee, and taught them on the Sabbath day, and they were astonished at his doctrine, for his word was with power. And in a synagogue there was a man which had a spirit of unclean devil, and cried out with a loud voice, saying, Let us alone. We have to do with thee, thou Jesus of Nazareth. Art thou come to destroy us? I know thee, who thou art, the Holy One of God. And Jesus rebuked him, saying, Hold thy peace, and come out of him. And when the devil had thrown him in the midst, he came out of him, and hurt him not. And they were all amazed, and spake among themselves, saying, What a word is this? For with authority and power commanded the unclean spirit, and they come out. And the fame of him went out into every place of the country around about. And he arose out of the synagogue, and entered in Simon's house, and Simon's wife, mother, was taken with a great fever, and they besought him for her. And he stood over her, and rebuked for fever, and left it, and it left her, and immediately she arose and ministered unto them. Now, when the sun was setting, all they what had any sick with divers disease brought them unto him, and he laid his hand on every of them, and he healed them. And devils also came out of many, crying out and saying, Thou art Christ, of Son of God. And he rebuked them, suffering them not to speak, for they knew that he was Christ. And when it was the day, he departed and went into a desert place, and the people saw him, and came unto him, and stayed him, that he should not depart from them. And he said unto them, I must preach the kingdom of God, and another city also, for therefore I am sent. And he preached in the synagogue of Galilee.
All right, pop quiz. What are some of the things that we learned about Jesus in that text? Yes, Joel. Always Joel first. I love it. His words had authority. Good. What else did we learn about Jesus in that text? He healed the sick. Sure. Bill? Envision him like a sponge who soaked the evil out of people. That's cool. Cool metaphor, man. An evil spirit was one of the first people to recognize him for who he really was, the Son of God. It's pretty good. Yeah, Sam? Yeah. Yep. It's good. What else? He went off to a solitary place. It's good. So that's one of the pieces that I kind of want to camp on today. So here we have in this story, we find out, and we're still kind of in the beginning of the Gospel of Luke. So we're really just trying to figure out, how much power and authority does this guy have? And so, we find out he can drive out evil spirits. He can heal the sick. Other things are spiritual beings are recognizing him as the Son of God, as the Messiah. And this Messiah, this Son of God, who has the power and authority to drive out evil spirits, feels the need to get away and go to a solitary place. And then everybody goes and looks for him and says, "Where have you been? And come back. There's more people that need to be healed." And Jesus, who had authority, who had power, said no. Drew a boundary and said, "That's not why I have came," and left people that were wanting his help. He left them and went to someone else. Jesus drew a boundary. Jesus drew limits. Jesus didn't help everybody. Jesus left some people disappointed. And if the Son of God, if the Messiah, who has authority over all things, feels the need to go to solitary places, and if the Son of God feels the need to draw boundaries and disappoint people, then maybe we do too. A couple years ago, I got a chance to go on a sabbatical. And before I went on my sabbatical, my counselor recommended a handful of activities to me. And one of the activities he recommended was that I read this little bitty book. It's a micro book, actually, called The Theology of the Ordinary by Julie Canlis. And his recommendation to me was that you could read Julie's book. It's very thin. You can read it in probably about 20 minutes if you really wanted to. Don't do that. What I would like you to do is I would like you to take little bit of pieces of it, a couple pages at a time, and over the course of your sabbatical, I would like you to read it very slowly and let it really sink in. And it's in this book that I was introduced to a concept that kind of blew my mind. Julie talked about this idea of God creating the universe and creating mankind. And then when he created mankind, man and woman, back way Adam and Eve in the garden, he created them very good with limits. He created them to be human. He created man and woman to need to sleep, to need to eat, to need to go to the bathroom, to not be able to have endless amounts of energy. Our limits are designed and necessary by God. Here's what Julie says. She says, when God created us, limited as we are, he said, it is very good. When he created us with bodies, this introduced the possibility for hunger and thirst and sleep. Limitation was written into their perfection because limitation put them in proper relationship with their Creator. Their humanity was not a problem for God or something he had to put up with. It was their greatest gift. If you feel like you don't have enough hours in the day, if you feel like you just can't get everything done, that is not a glitch or a bug or something wrong with you. That is how you were designed. Pete Cazares says this. He says, the essence of being created in God's image is our ability, like God, to stop. We imitate God by stopping our work and resting. If we can stop for one day a week or for a mini Sabbath each day called a daily office, then we touch something deep within us as image bearers of God. Our brains, bodies, spirits, and emotions are all wired by God for the rhythm of working and resting in him. You were created to work, and you were created to rest. And lastly, one of my favorite quotes that I've quoted in here, at least, 100 times, John Ortberg says this. He says, the requirements for true intimacy is unhurried time. If you think you can fit deep community into the cracks of an overloaded schedule, think again. Wise people do not try to microwave friendship, parenting, or marriage. You can't do community in a hurry. You can't listen in a hurry. You can't mourn or rejoice in a hurry. Many people lack great friends for the simple reason that they have never made pursuing community a high priority. And I think you could include in their relationship with God as well. That for most people that I speak to, they feel like I don't feel close to God, and I feel like I don't have relationships in my life that are really deep and meaningful. Often the reason is because we are not really making time to slow down for them. For most of our time together today, I would like us to watch a video together. And so Julie and her husband, Matt, had kind of an adventure where their life got radically slowed down, and they kind of learned the lesson of slowness. And they made a video about that, and I want to share that video with you today. And I feel like this comes in this kind of section of Luke, of Jesus getting ready. I mean, he's just starting his ministry, and he has all this power and all this authority, and potential is so high, but yet we see him begin this rhythm of slowing down and resting and setting boundaries is so important for our church right now. And frankly, I think it's so important for me because we are like at this season of our church right now where we feel so much potential. We were working in our new building yesterday. We have so many new people. We have so much excitement. I feel like God is doing something, and I'm feeling this pressure, and maybe some of you are feeling it too, of like, we have so much to do, and there's so much we have to accomplish. And if we run at a pace that is just go, 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 we're going to burn ourselves out, and we're going to miss out on our relationships with each other, and we're going to miss out on our relationships with God. And so I need to be reminded to slow down and to go to a quiet, solitary place. And I need to remember that it's okay to set limits, and maybe you do too. Let's watch this and learn from this together.
When you first met Matt, what was your impression?
He meant well, but he didn't know quite what he was doing. I think we helped.
I think they did help. I've been running for most of my life, running through life to get somewhere else. But the thing about running is that you miss things, many things. And if I kept running, I was going to miss everything. 15 years ago, I was finishing seminary. I'd studied history. I'd studied Jesus. I was pretty sure I knew what I was doing. The truth is, I was centuries away and miles away from what Jesus did and what I was supposed to be doing. When I was running, it was easy to stay hidden, to avoid being known. One professor knew this, Eugene Peterson. He said, Matt, if you want to become a pastor, go find a parish. Go find a fishbowl where you can't escape being known and where you lose the fear of being known.
I think when I realized that nobody in America gets listened to very much, I was surprised at how little people had relationships. And all I had to do was just sit there and listen. I'd never read anything on church growth. I just started out going through the neighborhoods, knocking on doors, getting acquainted with people. That's what started what I said to you. I just started looking, this is my parish.
He knew that if I really wanted to walk like Jesus, I had to slow down. I was like, Eugene, I'm in. I'm sold. Where do I go to learn to become this kind of person, this pastor? He smiled and he said, you might have to go further than you think. You might have to leave America. And I thought, that'll never happen. As it happened, my wife and I were invited to study in St. Andrews in Scotland. That's when everything began to change. This is the story of learning to walk instead of run. It's the story of the places and the people who slowed me down. It's the story of the freedom I found and the freedom that found me. So we moved to St. Andrews, began to study, began to fill our heads with more good knowledge. I also began to need some pounds. We needed money, and there was a job for a parish assistant. So I applied, got the job, and showed up to work. My first day on the job, I came to this door, and I said, "Where's my office?" Reverend McDonald said, "Your office?" And I said, "Right. Sorry, where's your office?" And he said, "My office?" Then he walked me around to the sign where he pointed to his home telephone number, which was hand-painted. There is no office. So where do I work? Then he pointed down the street and said, "Start walking. Get out into the parish." In Scotland, a parish is a piece of land. It's bordered by rivers, streams, mountain ridges, the ocean's edge. There are stone walls, farmers' fences. There are also roads, but roads that follow ancient walkways, paths people have walked for centuries, from one farm or one house to another. And each house has a name. American houses have numbers. In Scotland, houses have names. It took me a while to understand the difference. It took me a while to even notice. It took walking the parish. When he said start walking, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I was always driving my car, going too fast to notice people or the weather or anything. To be in a parish meant to walk. And that was a whole different way of living. The first door I knocked on, I actually did my I was nervous, and that felt friendly. And I learned that I wasn't there to give people the good news. I was there to be a part of their life. With time, questions might come out, but I ended up learning more about them and they about me than me communicating the truth they needed to hear.
People are not used to it being intimate in any verbal way. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear. We don't want to be known by name many times because we don't know if they're going to like us. Who can you trust?
My generation, our century, is the tourist generation. We are always on the move, and so we can avoid being known. We avoid our deepest fears of being known. I realized that this avoidance, that this way of moving and always being on the go, is totally different than the way Jesus lived in the first century, and the way most humans have lived for all of history. So two things were happening at once. I had Eugene calling me to slow down, to become a pastor. I also began reading Tom Wright. And in his writings, I discovered a whole different vision of what life was like in the first century.
We live in such a rootless world. My wife and I have moved house, I think, 16 times in 42 years. It's a sort of complete mirror opposite of that, polar opposite of that. To think of being in that one place is the Benedictine ideal, stabilitas, stability. You are here, you stay here, and you go deeper.
I witnessed this idea of stability firsthand at a nearby abbey, where the monks welcomed me on retreat as part of their community.
Stability usually means staying in the same monastery all your life till you die. And that's quite a challenge in a world which chases around all over the place. And trying to escape from who you are and where you are. And the secret of stability, or part of stability, is to realize that I'm a sinner, yeah. But before that, I'm a beloved sinner. And so I am loved by God as I am. Very quickly, you see people's faults, at least I do. Look at that guy, no. But to see people's virtues, no, it takes longer. To learn to know them takes time.
And it's not boring. It's only boring if you lack imagination. In fact, it's fascinating because human beings are endlessly fascinating. And you learn by going deeper rather than by the relentless quest for shallow novelty, which is how our culture lives.
The world I was discovering in the writings of Tom Wright exposed me to a whole different way of living, to the way that Jesus lived, especially to the way Jesus earned people's trust, how he risked being known. He lived in a fishbowl where everybody saw everything he did and heard everything he said.
When we read the New Testament, we must relentlessly avoid anachronism. We mustn't imagine that they think exactly like we do, to say, okay, let's go into a world where actually when you walk down the street, you know not only who everybody is, but who their uncles and cousins and aunts were, and who died last year and who got married the year before. That's the world that Jesus lived in. It's a very rich world, it's a very dangerous world. We'd be very vulnerable in that world, and we protect ourselves against that.
To continue my training, we had to move from St. Andrews to Pitlochry. Beautiful village, center of the Highlands. The church is perched on a hill. Malcolm Ramsey's the minister. I preached an awesome sermon one Sunday, but I asked Malcolm what he thought of it. Malcolm said the ending should have come 10 minutes sooner. I was like, Malcolm, that's only a 20-minute sermon. People deserve more on a Sunday. Malcolm said, Matt, people deserve more on a Monday. When you were writing that sermon, did you take time to visit people? Well, no, Malcolm, I was busy writing my sermon. That's when I knew I had to go back into the parish and learn some more names.
One part of speech that's the most important thing in the language is the name. Names are the very basic, life-giving term in language. You say a person's name, and it means something, because there's a relationship then. Until there's a name, there's no relationship. And I had pastors who never knew my name. I was always greeted by my pastors with, how's your soul today? Never my name. just my soul. It always irritated me.
So I started spending less time in my office and more time walking in the parish, meeting people. I knocked on one door, expecting a granny to answer the door, who I could look down upon and talk about the weather with. The man who opened it had deep blue eyes, giant red hair, and I froze. And that's when I met Alan Torrance.
Well, I've done a few good treks, and very often we like to get naked, no in any kind of crude way or to upset people. You can imagine coming through the woods and then you see about 30 lasses and guys, starkers, like, whoa, what's happening here? How you doing? We still say hello.
And sensing my discomfort, he invited me in, made me a cup of tea. We got to talking about why I was there, which I still wasn't sure, but he put me at ease. He made me feel at home.
The way I was brought up was that you had to show hospitality to folk. You know, give them a cup of tea, a biscuit, a meal if they need a meal. You know, so we take great pride in that. You know, we're no rich folk, but to me, you're poor if you can't offer hospitality.
Most of the main stories about what Jesus did are in that very small setting of Capernaum, Bethsaida, just the area around the north edge of the Sea of Galilee. And occasionally he gets into a boat, goes over to the other side. But we're still talking about what in our language are small villages, you know, a few hundred inhabitants.
Here was a guy who had never studied the Bible like I had, but he could see it better than I did. He could understand it almost naturally. In his person, in his way of seeing, I was moving to the first century, to the way people thought and saw things.
The law at the time was if you speak and you're speaking, you know, lies, then you will be punished by being stoned to death. You know, if he was coming out with bold statements about, you know, raising people for the dead, making the blind see, he had to have convinced communities that that was true, and or else communities would hold him to account, and that he would, you know, have no credibility whatsoever.
Part of Alan's skepticism was assuming Jesus preached in big cities, where he could project one image in public, but be somebody very different in private. You can't do that in a village. When Alan learned that Jesus lived in a village, earning people's trust the hard way, he believed. It wasn't a sermon that changed his mind. It was a map.
So that whole scale of things was crucial to my understanding and my convincing of, you know, the power of Jesus Christ.
Basically, a lot of what happened was in an oral culture where they told stories, where they remembered what had happened. We can get a little glimmer of this from time to time. If a celebrity comes to town, if a famous footballer or rock star, what we have to imagine is a culture which was like that about everything all the time. They just told this stuff, and they knew things as a result in a deeply human way, which we have been in danger of forgetting now for quite some time.
When I got here, I met Colin Presley. Colin works up at Wardford Farm. He works the fields, he raises sheep. He's the head elder of the church.
Well, we met Matt the first time in Meslick in the pub here around the corner there. We tried to introduce him to a few names. We tried to give him a brief outline of the village and who's who and where was where.
And to introduce me to the parish, he showed me a map. Colin then began to recount for me the names of each person who lived in each home, which also had names. And I thought, he's doing this from memory.
I live in a farm called Wardford, which is a name given to a part of the River Rythyn, which was very shallow and used to be able to cross over there with the horse and gig. Other big farms are Auchencrieve, Cato, Auchencrieve, Stephen Mackey, late Stephen Mackey, Balchwindichi, Lee, Haddo. There's just a number of farms around the parish here.
He had all these names memorized, and not just the names, but their stories. He knew the history of the families, the good, the bad, the painful. He just kept describing the people he knew and loved and looked after.
Things are done here correctly, perhaps leisurely, but I think there's a far better quality of life here in this small village where everybody knows everybody and there's a strong community spirit amongst us all. And he was a man from America, young, fast living perhaps, and we thought, well, we could maybe educate them in the more slower things of life.
In the beginning, this fishbowl world was a little bit scary. I can't say oppressive, but I was kind of thinking, my goodness, they can see everything I'm doing. When I watched how Colin would listen to me or to somebody else or take the time to visit someone, I realized I would need to make a whole lot more time than I used to be present with people.
If you live in the same community with other people, you also have the benefit of seeing God's grace at work in them. There's brother so-and-so. Don't go within 2 miles of him or Krakatoa will look like a penny banger. After 10 years, you can probably get within half a mile of him. After 40 years, you can maybe get within 6 feet of him. Okay, if God can do that with him, maybe he can work with me too.
Now, maybe the slowing down just has to do with more of a habit of being there. But something has to happen. You can't just rush through life. One of the things that technology makes it more difficult for us to do is that there's so much quick information. And if you don't get quick information, you probably think, well, forget about it. Somebody else will figure it out. But nobody's going to figure out somebody's name. You've got to pay attention for that.
Some years ago, there was a theologian who wrote a book called 3 Mile an Hour God, because basically we walk, most humans walk roughly 3 miles an hour. The thought of traveling at only 3 miles an hour fills most of us with horror now. If we are walking, if we are going at 3 miles an hour, we are going at a much more, if you like, humane pace, and there is time to process what we're seeing and what we're experiencing and smelling and knowing. And then the thought that maybe, if we are made in the image of God, maybe this is why we sometimes get so frustrated with God. We want God to go at 60 miles an hour. If I see what I want God to do, I want to do it right now. And in fact, God is walking slowly around Palestine, around Galilee. God is doing what God is doing in God's time. And maybe if we were prepared to slow down a bit, look who's talking, we might actually be able, paradoxically, finally to catch God up.
The idea of slowing down to catch up with God is counterintuitive. It makes no sense. People used to wish each other well with the expression, Godspeed to you, by which they meant, we hope it goes quickly. Maybe God's speed really is 3 miles per hour. And if we walk with him, we will let him know us and let other people know us too. This is what Tom Wright is writing about. This is what Alan Torrance can do naturally looking me in the eye. This is what I was now tasting in talking to people who were once strangers, who had given me grace. This is how Jesus changed the world and is still changing me.
I'm not sure that we can ever go back and pretend that we like people were 2,000 years ago. For most of us, that's not an option. It seems to me what we have to do is to learn to use wisely the gifts that we now have been given.
Becoming known is a mutual process. It's a giving and receiving holding nothing back and not saying, I refuse to accept this aspect of you, or I refuse to give this aspect of myself.
You know, some people say, oh, slower means, you know, it's not good. Slow is not good. But sometimes slow is good.
There's no place on this earth that's without potential for holiness. Or maybe the potential for unearthing holiness right where we are, with these people we are with.
13 years ago, I thought I was ready to become a pastor. It's crazy how one conversation with Eugene started this whole journey. I may have helped some people learn how to trust Jesus. They taught me how to walk like Jesus, how to listen like him, how to risk being known, and how to know others. But there's still a long way to go.